There's something almost dreamlike about a bridge. It is not simply stone or wood, not only arches and beams. It is an attempt to cross the impossible. It is the hand of humanity reaching across a river, a valley, or even time itself. Yet some bridges, rather than connecting two shores, seem to stretch across centuries. Tonight, let me tell you the slow, quiet story of a bridge that refused to hurry. A bridge that was dreamed, planned, and rebuilt over and over again. A bridge that seemed to measure its life not in years, but in generations. 200 years passed before its arches finally kissed in the middle, before people could finally walk across. It began, like most ambitious things, with a dream. The dream of a king. In the early 14th century, a king stood by a river that seemed too wide and too wild for ordinary men. Ferries struggled to carry carts across, and floods often swept them away. Traders complained. Soldiers grumbled. But the king, whose court had been built on grand gestures, wanted more than a ferry. He wanted a bridge. The bridge would be a symbol, not only of power, but of permanence. A road that did not stop at water's edge. A path that would defy the river's temper. He ordered his builders to begin, and they did, with stones dragged from quarries, with ropes and wooden scaffolds, with sweat and prayers. They began raising the first piers. Villagers watched the skeleton of arches rise above the current, but the river, stubborn as always, struck back. In the spring thaw, heavy rains turned calm water into a roar. The half-finished piers toppled. Stones sank beneath the waves. Months of labor were gone in a single night. The king fumed. The masons cursed. And yet, the bridge remained unfinished. A generation waiting. When the king died, his son inherited not only the crown, but also the stubborn dream of the bridge. He, too, commanded it to be built. But wars came and drained the treasury. The stones lay untouched. Another decade passed. Children who once saw scaffolds now saw only ruined piles in the water, half swallowed by moss. The bridge became a story people told on market days. Once, a king tried to cross the river with stone. The river laughed. Still, the dream refused to vanish. Each generation tried again, laying new stones, repairing old ones, and watching storms undo their progress. The bridge as a mirror of time. There is a strange beauty in failure that repeats itself. Each attempt to raise the bridge reflected the age it belonged to. In one century, the workers were peasants pressed into labor by lords. In another, skilled craftsmen were paid with coin from merchants who longed for easier trade. Later, during years of plague, the bridge stood silent, its scaffolds abandoned, as if even carpenters feared the air itself. The bridge grew and collapsed again, as though time itself wanted to carve its initials into every stone. Children of the bridge. Imagine a child, centuries ago, growing up in a village near the river. Perhaps he played in the shallows, watching men hammer beams. Perhaps he asked his father, "When will the bridge be finished?" And perhaps his father only sighed, knowing he too had asked the same question when he was a boy. The bridge became something passed down like an inheritance. Unfinished, uncertain, always waiting. People lived their whole lives with it, standing half-built in the background. To them, it was less a project and more a neighbor, sometimes inspiring, sometimes mocking, always present. A symbol of patience. By the 16th century, travelers who came to the region saw the bridge not as a road but as a curiosity. Some called it cursed. Others admired its ambition. Scholars wrote in their journals, "It seems to take longer to build this bridge than to build an entire city." And in truth, they were not wrong. Cities rose and fell in the time it took this bridge simply to hold its place. The river finally yielded. At last, in the early 17th century, after 2 centuries of false starts, collapses, and rebuilding, the final arch was raised. Stone by stone, carefully set, the great halves met in the middle. Workers cheered. Villagers gathered. For the first time, the river was truly crossed. But here is the quiet irony. By the time the bridge was finished, new roads had been laid elsewhere. Trade had shifted. The bridge, which once promised to be the lifeline of an empire, became instead a monument to patience. It stood, it still stands, not as the busiest road, not as the most useful crossing, but as the slowest promise ever kept. When a bridge takes 2 centuries to be born, it sees more than most buildings ever could. It becomes a witness, quiet but constant, to all the movements of human life that flow around it. The half-built arches, for years upon years, stood like broken teeth against the sky. Travelers passed by on their way to ferries downstream. Pilgrims carried their candles and prayers, looking at the ruins as if they were the bones of some ancient creature. Merchants sighed at the sight, wondering how many more decades of wet boots and muddy carts they would endure before the promise of dry stone underfoot would come true. The bridge, though unfinished, had already become a landmark. People would say, "Meet me by the old bridge," even though it was not yet a bridge at all. It was a ruin in progress, a monument of effort that had not yet succeeded. And in this way, it shaped the rhythm of lives without even being completed. Generations who waited. Imagine the family of a stonemason. The grandfather hauled blocks of granite to the riverbank, sweating in the summer heat, dreaming that his grandchildren would walk across the bridge. The father carved stones into careful arches, but he never saw them rise higher than the water's edge before a flood swept them away. The son, weary of promises, chose another life, becoming a farmer instead of a builder. Yet even as he tilled his fields, he could see the old stones from a distance, as if they were mocking him for abandoning the family craft. The bridge stretched not only across water, but across lifetimes. To live near it was to be reminded daily that some dreams are larger than the people who dream them, festivals and fears. Curiously, the unfinished bridge became part of local celebrations. Every spring, when the floods receded, villagers would gather on its stones, climbing the incomplete arches, laughing and drinking ale. Musicians played, children ran, and the bridge became less a failure and more a stage, a theater of everyday joy. But not all memories were cheerful. During the wars of the 15th century, enemy troops camped on the broken piers. Locals whispered that soldiers would tie prisoners to the stones, letting the river's tide decide their fate. The unfinished bridge became a shadowy place at night, a reminder that half-built dreams can be used for darker purposes too. The craftsman's pride. It is easy, centuries later, to think of the bridge only as an inconvenience, a road that took too long. But for the craftsman who worked on it, it was more than a job. A mason who carved his name into the underside of a stone believed he was leaving a signature that would last forever. A carpenter who shaped scaffold with precision felt he was building not wood but memory. Even if floods carried their work away, the pride remained.